Okay, I think today I'm going to tell about modern experiment management systems architecture for scientific big data. This is a topic of several researches I took part because before I worked at CERN, and also I have some researches in our laboratory of unstructured data processing. So we decided, I'm a PhD student, and I've decided that I'd like to collect all my experience for my PhD work. And this is a starting point, and I'd like to tell more about modern scientific experiments. What is a major problem of all the experiments? When we are talking about modern scientific experiments, we usually talk about different data and heterogeneous infrastructure of these experiments. And when we are talking about data, also we consider that there are a lot of different sources of data. It can be manually created data, it can be data gathered from different devices. It also can be data produced by any other software. And usually, when we are talking about old-fashioned experiments, there can be just data that created manually, but usually when we are talking about different spheres of experiments related to some hardware and software, there are different points of collecting data that we need to aggregate and to process it somehow, because when we have several tries, especially in some experiments with some modeling and simulations, mm, we need to control this process from time to time just to understand how to collect this data. Because usually experiment digital environment that exists can grow in an unpredictable way. We understand it by our experiments in our research group, because when we are talking about research teams and research team aims and objectives, we understand that um, we we may change our goals after several iterations of our experiment, especially, for example, in some experiments related to, for example, data processing itself. I mean, for example, text processing and something like a text recognition, or other different kind of experiments related to maybe social science or other kind of sciences. When we have one hypothesis and we reject it, and we need to restructure our experiment, the whole of our experiment. Also, at the same time, we need to build a stable and flexible data flow, because on the one hand, we need to, when we are talking about modern experiments, we suppose data stream processing. On the other hand, when we change our goals and aims, we need to rebuild as soon as possible with a low cost the data flow, the whole data flow, and it's better not to create something like a standalone module that do everything at once, because in this in this way we can collide with some big problems, and we can lose a lot of time for reprocess this experiment. And the problem also is that different research teams and different experiments have different styles and different patterns. But actually, now in literature, we can find the same issues for modern projects with different solutions. And when we collided with some issues in our laboratory, I mean at TPU, we understand that it's better to find a unified pattern. And when we are talking about unifying pattern, it's about style and about some maybe some software that we can develop. But usually when we are deploying something, we also can look at as a background. So the pattern, it means not that we need to um, implement everything at once in some unified way. And also one of the biggest problems in modern experiments is the exponential growth of data. And it means that we are not able to gather everything at once and without any supposing that something can be like the things that we need to get rid of. Because, for example, when we are collecting some data from web, we understand that it's like a limitless source, and we cannot gather everything because, for example, sometimes we even need just a small data snapshot, and that's it. For this pattern, that's enough. And also, when we are talking about scientific experiments, we can say that expansion of cooperation through the creation of scientific collaborations also can give us some impact, because, for example, an experiment can start from a small group of researchers and from 1 or 2 or 3 iterations and one experiment, but then this laboratory can we can imagine one laboratory. This laboratory can involve several research teams from other, let's say, universities or some research institutes. And we also have the fact that an environment can be expanded, and then we have an exponential growth of data and many things around. So the one of the projects that I took part in, it was related to high energy nuclear physics experiment Atlas, where you know that this is one of the biggest laboratories in the world related to this field of study, and Atlas is the biggest detector at CERN. So, of course, there are a lot of different research groups, but when we were talking about metadata, so data about data of research experiments, there are two huge information infrastructure here, because Atlas experiment has a long period of existence. And we understand that there are already a lot of different sources and subsystems that keep some information about experiments, but it's still a really big deal for scientists to find some information in different separated storages about the one experiment, and when they need to reprocess something and to recall something, it takes a lot of time and have a lot of issues. That's why we decided to create data knowledge base in collaboration of TPU, CERN, and Kurchatov Institute. And this is a great experience, but when we were describing and developing different parts of this system, we didn't consider this like an experiment management system. But when I decided to look back, what was the origin of this topic? Actually, our data knowledge base and the subsystem of metadata management has all features of experiment management system, and the origin of such kind of systems were even before so-called digital age, and of course the age of big data, which I will talk about later. And Zoo experiment management system was one of the first systems. This system was some kind of desktop systems, and through the time we found several different examples of different systems. The major part of them has the aim of the major part of those systems were not about creating unified pattern or creating something like lightweight to manage. It was something like a really huge subsystems with or orientated on a particular subject. That's why it was all the systems have their own features, which we considered, and we gathered the pattern across the experience of different research teams. And we tried to understand what were the key features for all of the systems, and we decided to add uh, what we gathered to our concept. And what about big data ecosystem? Actually, of course, for example, zoo system was created before big data ecosystems, but now when we are talking about data acquisition, data aggregation, and data storaging, all of those questions are about big data today. And it means that usually we need data integration subsystems just in case, because we are not able to gather everything at once and process it. And we need to deal with data streams, and we need to decide what we need to keep and what we need to reuse somehow. And also, we are working with heterogeneous data sources, because this is also a key feature of big data, because big data related to a variety of different data types. And this is also an issue for processing. And also, when we are talking about experiment and about big data, we understand that we need the whole data lifecycle support. The data lifecycle starts from gathering data from a particular source, or from the moment when data is created, maybe by our subsystems, it doesn't matter, and till the moment when the data will be kept in a storage, or it can be reduced also. So data should be observed during the life cycle, and data management is one of the tasks inside such kind of systems. And also, there is another problem why we cannot provide just simple engineering solution. It's just because we have an unknown data value before exploratory data analysis. So we understand that we can change the data source because of changing the goals and aims of the research group, or we can add another source, and at the same time we still don't know what's the value of this data, and we need to create some data snapshots and add some snapshot storages, for example, till the moment when we will understand what is the value of this data, and something like this. And also, when we are talking about data, of course, we understand that in this ecosystem we still have the problem of rapid growth of data, and it should be managed by any kind of different software. Turning back to the research, the previous researches, I'd like to describe briefly about Atlas DKB. On this slide, you can see the data processing pipeline. The thing is that we apply such kind of architecture because of usually we depends on our architecture depends on the decision of physicists, and that means that our data pipeline could be changed by their decision at any moment. And when we are talking about development of different data processing pipelines, it's better to use ETL concept. When we have on each processing stage, we have just one atomic operation for one module, and in that way, this is the easiest way to process data. At the same time, it still takes time. That's why we decided to use such kind of technique. And when we were talking about how it should be in our future test bed here at TPU, we decided that we still use ETL pipelines because this is a good technique for, let's say, so dependable data processing needs. On the other hand, we still have research background at TPU in our laboratory of unstructured data processing, where we have the tasks about web mining and opinion mining. And it means that usually we process different snapshots of texts gathered from open sources. And we have flexible workflow because we usually have different tasks, and those tasks are divided through the research team. So we have also multi-branch working process, and this process have some, let's say, issues because different researchers have different styles and different qualifications, because this is an interdisciplinary research team. And at the same time, we understand that there is a need of experiment cataloging, and that's why we still need to manage this process and to organize this process as easy as it possible, because some researchers, they have they have just average skills of programming, but they have, for example, some skills in other disciplines. That's why we need to provide also some kind of interface and some kind of simplified tools just to interact with input and output data interfaces. And what about our concept? Our concept is to develop a unified pattern based on several components that are presented here. It's about metadata management system, protocol for metadata management system, ETL pipelines, knowledge base, internal and external heterogeneous data sources, and message-oriented middleware. Those components are required for building such kind of system. I'd like not to say in this presentation about the details of such kind of software, but a part of software as ready to use is open source software, for example, message-oriented middleware. But when we are talking about ETL pipelines and protocol for metadata management systems, this is our experience that we implemented by ourselves. And the main research is performed based on the Laboratory of Unstructured Data Processing at TPU. So we decided to try to make a test bed. On this slide, you can see the principal architecture of this test bed, which we are gonna to deploy this spring, I think. With several heterogeneous storages, but on this slide you can see that this is a high-level architecture. We consider that we don't know how many pipelines and data sources we will involve, because it can be changed by a decision of a research team, for example. And for our future plans, I think this is the shortest part. It's about building a workflow. We are gonna to build a workflow for the laboratory and to make a test bed for the lab projects. And also we are planning to test and deploy the initial implementation of the full system based on our experiments of the both laboratory working parts. So that's it. If you have any questions.